This is a video for general use, not just by Whitley Lodge Baptist Church, which is based upon a book that I co-authored getting on for 20 years ago now with two consultant psychiatrists, Chris Williams and Ingrid Whitten, called I'm Not Supposed to Feel Like This. And it's a Christian self-help book for those experiencing depression and or anxiety. I want to share this in the context of the current situation we're in, and one of the concerns that I have that we're all being compelled to spend a lot more time in our own company, perhaps confined to our own quarters. And without a doubt, this can lead to issues with our mental health. And I think this book has some useful insights that may help at this particular time. I'm not going to share all of the book. It would take too long to do that. I'm going to do perhaps a number of videos and try to do it in a way that helps people in this particular situation that we're all experiencing in the minute, just at the minute. Perhaps definitions are useful. What is depression? Feeling fed up and low in mood is a normal part of our life. When difficulties or upsetting events occur, it is not unusual to feel down, stop enjoying things, and to feel low for a time as a reaction to events. Likewise, when good things happen, a person may experience happiness, pleasure, and a sense of achievement. The reasons for low mood are usually clear: a stressful situation, a relationship difficulty, feeling let down by someone, financial difficulties, unforeseen events, or some other practical problem. Most of the time, the drop in mood only lasts for a short period of time and then we bounce back. Occasionally, however, a person's mood may seem to fall for little or no obvious reason. It may be difficult to begin with to know quite why. In some cases, this depressed feeling can worsen and completely dominate the person's life. When someone feels very low for more than 2 weeks and feels like this day after day, week after week, this is called a depressive illness. It is important to say that there should be no stigma attached to the diagnosis of depression. In reality, the term is simply a convenient way of describing a broad range of symptoms that vary from person to person, but are having an unhelpful impact on their lives. What is anxiety? Anxiety, worry, tension and stress are all terms that are used to describe what is a widespread experience for many people. Anxiety is a common emotion which at times can be helpful, even though it can feel very unpleasant. For example, in situations of danger, we begin to feel anxious, and this prompts us to try to deal with the threatening situation by getting away from it as rapidly as possible. If you walk along a badly maintained path next to a large drop, anxiety can be life-saving, appropriate and helpful. However, sometimes anxiety can occur inappropriately and then it becomes unhelpful. The person may feel anxious in situations that are not really dangerous at all, or notice excessive anxiety well beyond what is actually helpful or appropriate in the circumstances. Worrying thoughts are common in anxiety. In worry, the person goes over things again and again in their mind in a way that is unhelpful because it does not actually help to resolve the difficulty that is being worried about. Instead, problems are turned over and thought about again and again. Sometimes the worry may be out of all proportion. Something that may originally have happened in a few moments, perhaps something that someone has said to you, can dominate your thinking for much of the following days or weeks, adding up in total to many days or even weeks of worry over the following months. In anxiety, the person often overestimates the threat or danger they are facing, and at the same time usually underestimates their own capacity to cope with the problem. Normally, when there is no stress, the person feels able to cope with the problems they face. In other situations, they may begin to feel stressed. Either they see the problem as too large or overwhelming, or they think they cannot cope. In both situations, the anxiety balance is upset and the person begins to feel increasingly stressed and upset. At times of emotional distress, it is sometimes easy to forget that we are not alone when we face life's difficulties. We have not only our own capacity to cope, but also the support and love God offers us. At the extreme end of this, there is the awful experience of panic attacks, and I won't dwell on these excessively other than to read a little bit of this. Sometimes anxiety can come on very rapidly and reach such a high level the person feels unwell and has to stop what they're doing and try to escape from the situation, or may become feeling like they're rabbits caught in the headlamps of a car, feeling that something catastrophic is about to happen. Panic attacks typically have a rapid onset and are short-lived, usually lasting no longer than 20 to 30 minutes. During panic, the person can experience catastrophic fears that a sudden and threatening physical illness or terrible event will occur right now. I'm going to faint, I'm going to suffocate, I'm going to collapse, I'm going to have a stroke, I'm going to have a heart attack, and so on. In actual fact, these sorts of things are far more common than you might think, perhaps slightly less so with panic attacks. And being Christians does not mean that we don't get these things. Sometimes we tell ourselves that we have a God who loves us, a God who's all-powerful, and although on one level we believe it, we find ourselves unable to cope. In fact, we are in good company. We're in good company because the Bible has a whole wealth of examples of people who were in similar situations, people who's experienced anxiety, people who experienced depression, people who struggled to keep things in perspective. And the reason for sharing this right now is because a number of us, I think, will have struggles with being maybe on our own, maybe confined with one other person, and however much we really love that person, there are times when it just kind of wears a little bit thin and you start getting each other's nerves, and then that source of support we feel to be failing us. And combined with those things which can cause us to feel down, a little depressed, there is the whole anxiety about how long will this go on for? Am I going to become ill myself? What about my family? What about my loved ones? You may have people who are working in the NHS or in situations of vulnerability. And so the anxiety comes in on the back of that. And so we can experience feeling down, struggling because our mood is dropping, and we can also feel anxious. And that's the situation that one way or another all of us are in at the minute. And so what do we do? How can we address these questions? How can we help ourselves not to feel the way that we may be feeling? I'm Not Supposed to Feel Like This is written from the perspective of cognitive behavioural therapy. I love CBT, as it's called, cognitive behavioural therapy, because it is so compatible with Christian outlook and with a Christian worldview. The Christian worldview says that whatever you are feeling now, it doesn't necessarily have to stay that way. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that you should feel guilty if you feel down or anxious or depressed. What I am suggesting is that you have the belief that it doesn't have to be like that. And there are certain things that we can do. We can challenge our way of thinking. We can challenge our behaviour. And we can try to put in place thinking and behaviour and coping strategies which will make a real difference to the way that we live. So I'm going to show you a little bit, a page from the book, and then say a little bit about it, which is called The 5 Areas of Anxiety and Depression. I'm hoping you could see that. I don't have means at the moment of transmitting it. But it begins with one box at the top that says life situation, stroke relationship or practical problems, and then an arrow down to, and then there's a circle of 4 things, all of which interact with each other. Altered thinking with extreme and unhelpful thoughts, altered physical symptoms, altered behaviour, reduced or avoided activity or unhelpful behaviours, and altered emotional feelings. So if you didn't get the picture, or if it's gone out of your head, imagine the one box at the top, the life situation that's causing us the anxiety, the depression, and then there are 4 things that can either feed that or can help us with it. Our thinking, the way we think, becomes altered. That in turn affects our physical being. Our bodies may act differently. For instance, when I get stressed, I get a little bit of little spots and things on my legs, and that's how I know I'm stressed, because I have one of those. And actually, I have one now, although I think it's improving. So it's altered thinking and unhelpful thought. It's altered. Our bodies can alter in this. Our behaviour alters. We change the way we behave, and our emotions and our feelings change as well. Here's an example from the book about this kind of situation and how it works, and you may be able to apply this to something that you know or can think of. John is going shopping this morning. As he gets ready at home, he cannot find his wallet. He immediately jumps to the very worst conclusion that his wallet and credit cards have been stolen. He begins to feel very anxious and notices a sick feeling in his stomach and a tense feeling in his head. He immediately phones the credit card agency and the bank to cancel all his cards. He then phones his friend Anne, who he knows from his Bible church study group, and talks to her for a few minutes about what has happened. She is sympathetic and supportive and encourages him to remember where he had last seen the wallet and suggests that he look round the house to see if he can find it. John thanks her and is pleased that he called her because he now feels a little bit better. He says he will let her know if he finds it and that he will see her that evening at her house for the next Bible study group meeting. Later in the morning, John finds the wallet in his coat pocket. He had forgotten he had put it there yesterday. John then tries to avoid seeing or talking to Anne because he is worried that she will think that he's a right fool and will ask him about this if he goes to the evening meeting. He therefore decides not to go to the evening's meetings as a result. And so what you can see from John's behaviour is that a particular incident has happened. He's lost his wallet. This changes the way he thinks. He becomes anxious. It changes his behaviour. He overreacts in terms of his friend Anne. He doesn't go out because he's afraid that he'll be embarrassed at seeing her. He has physical sensations, a sickness in the pit of his stomach. And all of this changes the way John acts, and all because for a while he misplaced his wallet. Can you see how it's very easy for something that is relatively small to have quite serious ongoing effects? Now, just look at that same story from the perspective of Anne, the friend that John phoned. Anne is phoned by her friend John, who is worried that he has lost his wallet. Anne knows that he has occasionally done this before and found the wallet later. Anne tries to tell John that it is possible he will find the wallet and suggests he thinks back to when he last saw it and looks in places around the house, such as in drawers, trousers and coat pockets. After John has rung off to go and do this, here's the other side of it, Anne begins to worry that she may have sounded irritable towards John and that she may not have been supportive enough. She feels guilty and worries that she has upset him, and later notices that he hasn't called her back to let her know what happened. John then also doesn't come to the Bible study meeting that she led that evening. That night, Anne lies awake worrying that their friendship has been harmed and that she has upset him. She decides not to phone John for a few days because she is not sure how he might react if she really has upset him. And so you see, Anne, because John and Anne don't communicate properly, Anne thinks unhelpful thoughts. Her thinking alters. Her feelings, her emotions alter. Physically, she experiences sensations that are not pleasant. And she alters her behaviour. You see how it can be that a situation that in itself is relatively benign and harmless can become a source of anxiety, of feelings of depression. It can alter our physical bodies, it can alter the way we think, and it can alter the way we behave. And these things all interact with each other. Remember the 4 things: altered thinking, altered physical symptoms, altered behaviour, and altered emotional feelings. And they all interact with one another to send us into a situation where we feel bad about ourselves. And this can lead to us feeling down. Or if we're prone to anxiety, it can make us feel depressed or more anxious. Think, for instance, of the wonderful psalm that we sing so often in various forms, Psalm 42. As the deer longs for flowing streams, so my soul longs for you. It's actually almost a song of lament, because it goes on to say, when shall I come and behold the face of God? My tears have been my food day and night, while people say to me continually, where is your God? I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? That's Psalm 42, verses 1 to 3 and verse 9. Not only did the psalmist, who once went with the throng and led them in procession to the house of God, Christian leaders are not exempt from this, that's in verse 4, not only did he feel the remoteness of a God he had once had a close intimacy with, but he kept encountering people who contributed to his depressed mood by challenging the existence or certainly the presence of what was previously a source of comfort and strength. So if you are feeling this way, be encouraged. Many great servants of God have travelled the same path and asked the same questions. But the question remains, why should God seem so remote when I feel like this and need him the most? One of the reasons we can feel like this may be due to a false understanding of our own nature. We may have a picture of the human personality with different watertight compartments labelled mind, body and spirit. And because we see these as different parts of our personality, we fail to understand how they relate to and interact with each other. Just because our mind or body is suffering, we sometimes do not recognise that our spiritual life is likely to be affected too. The Bible does not describe different compartments of a human being. While Scripture speaks of the heart and the mind and the spirit of the individual, it also recognises that we are a unity. And each part of our existence affects and is affected by all of the others. Good physical health is likely to encourage good mental health, and both are likely to affect the spiritual aspects of our life. Poor mental health may well go with poor physical health, and both adversely affect how we feel and think about our relationship with God. So, what happens? We're all experiencing at the moment a practical situation that may be causing our mood to drop. It may be creating feelings of anxiety. Here's another couple of paragraphs. When feeling low or anxious, it is common to unhelpfully focus on events such as past or current problems, practical difficulties, debts, housing, neighbour problems, job, relationship difficulties, problems we may face in the future, how to deal with people, family problems, family relationships. One of the less pleasant experiences for many people experiencing depression or anxiety is that the future looks rather bleak and even hopeless. Usually it is not nearly as dark as most of us think at these times, but it frequently can seem as if there is no light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes problems completely dominate our thinking. It's as if we're using a telescope which magnifies our problems and prevents us seeing any positive aspects of life. You may overlook or downplay your own strengths and ability to cope. You may believe you lack the capacity to overcome your problems and that you have no chance of knowing how even to start to do so. The anxiety balance is upset and you may begin to feel increasingly stressed and depressed as a result. This unhelpful focus on problems and difficulties, past, present and future, does not help in sorting out your problems. Instead, the problems are focused on and mulled over again and again in a way that doesn't help solve them and may in fact make them seem a lot worse than they really are. Anxiety and depression may also lead to other changes in how you think. Thoughts become extreme, get things out of proportion. You may find that you make negative predictions about how things will work out and jump to the very worst conclusions. Like John and Anne, you may indulge in mind reading and trying to second guess what other people think of you, and that's unhelpful too. You may overlook your strengths and the positive aspects of your situations and simply judge yourself as a failure. Get down with yourself. Be self-critical. Sometimes it can seem as if we're seeing things through a negative mental filter, so that only the negatives in the situation and ourselves are seen, and more positive aspects are overlooked. A key point. These unhelpful thinking styles are important because they tend to reflect consistent and unhelpful thought patterns that we use again and again. Almost everyone shows at least some of these thinking styles from time to time. Normally, when we are not feeling low or distressed, we can balance and change these thoughts fairly easily. The problem is that during times of anxiety and depression, they become more frequent, come into our minds more and become harder to challenge. Beginning to notice these thinking patterns is an important first step in the process of change. So, thinking is important. It can affect how you feel emotionally. How you think can affect your behaviour. What you do. That you do less. You avoid people. Of course, at the moment it's hard to see people, but avoid ringing them. Avoid connecting by electronic means. We have a whole host of things we can do in that regard now, and particularly from a spiritual point of view. Negative thinking can affect our thoughts about God. We stop seeing ourselves as objects of God's love, as people who God is crazy about and God wants to regard as his children. And we do other things. We remember mistakes and sins from the past. We dwell on ways that lead to self-condemnation and guilt. We think that we're cut off from God and God is cross with us, displeased with us and doesn't want anything more to do with us. We think about other people in our church that think badly of me because of the way I am. Or if I really told people how I really feel, they would be critical of me and my faith as a Christian. And some people have this real problem with a thing called the unforgivable sin, that I'm sure I've committed the unforgivable sin. And so God won't really love me anymore. The only thing I'll say about the unforgivable sin is if you're worried that you've committed it, you haven't committed it, because if you had committed it, you wouldn't be worried about committing it. So be reassured on that front. And so altered thinking can alter our mood. We have a low mood. We feel down, upset, blue. Something just feels empty, and we don't quite know why. And it's very difficult for things to pick us up. And the only things that will are things that perhaps are not helpful or productive for us. We have a profound lack of pleasure and enjoyment that things that we previously enjoyed. We just don't really want to do them anymore. And if we do them, it doesn't bring us joy anymore. We avoid people, we avoid worship, we avoid music. We avoid things that can help us that aren't productive. They're not productive because we don't enjoy them anymore. We feel guilt usually goes with any kind of depressed mood. It's ironic that people who are feeling depressed very frequently beat themselves up over almost anything, often beat themselves up for feeling down. Feelings of guilt are exacerbated and strengthened, and we feel unable to cope with them. We worry more. We have greater stress and tension and anxiety. We may panic. We may become angry and irritable, perhaps more with ourselves, but we may take it out on others. We may feel shame and embarrassment about ourselves. All of this can lead to altered physical symptoms. Sleep patterns can be disturbed. We may put on weight. We may reduce weight, because usually in depression and anxiety, people either eat lots more or they eat lots less, and so weight can become a problem. We have less energy. Physical symptoms: constipation, diarrhea, physical pain. We may actually feel physical pain that is caused by anxiety. We may have agitation, find it very difficult to sit still, stand still, be still, simply to relax. And all of this may affect our behaviour. We don't do things that can make us feel better. We stop having fun. We stop speaking to, interacting with friends. Although we can all go out for a walk in the sunshine, if there is any, we don't. Because whilst it did once give us pleasure, now we're convinced it won't. And along with that, we may start doing things that are not good to do. We may start doing things like drinking, staying in bed, not getting out of bed, overeating, trying to block how we feel. So all of those things are possibly what you're feeling, thinking now. And it might be a good idea, so I don't want this video to last any longer than 30 minutes, and I will do another one about positive steps to take in the next day or two. But this video may help you to think about yourself, what you're feeling. You may have had what a friend of mine used to call an aha moment, realizing that something I've described is actually very much the way that you currently feel, and it may help you. It may help you to write down the life situation that you currently have, perhaps the current fix that we're all in simply being confined so much to our homes, and then to say, how has this altered my thinking? How has it altered me physically? How has it altered my behaviour? And how has it altered my feelings? And draw a little circle where you can see how those things are all connected. You can, of course, order the book from Amazon. I don't get these free either, so I'm afraid you'll have to pay for it. But the book has all these diagrams in, and you might find it useful. It has a closing prayer for this chapter, for this little section, and I'm going to finish with this. Thank you, Father, that what I'm feeling is not because I'm worthless or inferior, and for the knowledge that many other people, even now, are feeling much as I am. I pray today especially for your people who are feeling worried and stressed, for those feeling cut off from you, depressed and even suicidal. Thank you for your love for me and those sharing similar experiences just now. Thank you for caring for me and for always being there even when I do not feel as if you are there. I pray for myself and for others who are experiencing this. May I apply what I have learned to my everyday life. Help me to trust you even when trusting anyone seems difficult. I place my trust in you again. I believe that the dark tunnel will come to an end in your time. In the name of Jesus. Amen. There's a Bible meditation that suggests to look at Matthew 6:25 to 34 and ask the questions, what's God saying to me at this time? Matthew 6:25 to 34. How can I hold on to these promises in my heart? What would stop me holding on to those promises? What changes can I make to make sure I choose to focus on the positive things that God has to say? Have a read of 1 Corinthians 1:8 to 9 and Colossians 1:9 to 14. That may help you to focus on good things. Think who you are talking to about how you feel. Think about where you get your support from. Think about your communication with God and with other people, and think about how that can be perhaps more helpful than it is. I'm going to finish there. The next one of these that I do, which will be on, hoping will be on the same YouTube channel, will cover unhelpful thinking and behaviour and how we can make things different in our lives. Thanks for listening, and I hope you found it helpful. Feedback is more than welcome.